all, that money is property, money is not speech, that corporations are entities that spur our economy but do not have a constitutional right to spend unlimited amounts of money in politics. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody after this about what's happening at the grassroots level across the country. Thank you.
And the U.S. Senate continues speeches today on the government shutdown, now on its 9th day, and the federal debt limit, which the Treasury Department says will hit a week from tomorrow on October 17th. Live coverage of the Senate.
Let us pray. O God, in whose presence our souls take delight, to whom in affliction we call, forgive us for continuing to sow to the wind, even when hearing the sounds of the approaching whirlwind. Lord, when our federal shutdown delays payments of death benefits to the families of children dying on faraway battlefields, it's time for our lawmakers to say enough is enough. Cover our shame with the robe of your righteousness. Forgive us, reform us, and make us whole. We pray in your merciful name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., October 9, 2013. To the Senate. On the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Heidi Heitkamp, a senator from the state of North Dakota, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Patrick J. Leahy, President Pro Tempore.
The Majority Leader.
Following leader remarks, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 2 p.m. today. During that period of time, senators will be permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each. There are 2 measures at the desk due for second reading, I'm told.
The clerk will read the titles of the bills for the second time.
S-1569, a bill to ensure the complete and timely payment of the obligations of the United States government until December 31st, 2014. H.J. Res. 77, making continuing appropriations for the Food and Drug Administration for fiscal year 2014 and for other purposes.
Madam President, I would object to any further proceedings with regard to both of these matters.
Objection is heard. The bills will be placed on the calendar under Rule 14.
Madam President, it's very hard to find, on occasion, common ground here in Washington. And as of late, it's been hard all the time. But there's one thing on which Republicans and Democrats should be able to agree. There's no more important issue before Congress than to prevent a catastrophic default on our debt. Default would put our economy in grave danger, and that is a gross understatement. I've said it. So many of my Republican colleagues have said it, and the business community is shouting it from the rooftops. Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein said this about averting default. He's not known as a great liberal or outstanding Democrat, but he is known as a great businessman. Here's what he said, and I quote, "While the current government shutdown is unfortunate, the impacts of a debt default would be magnitudes worse and should not even be considered a viable option. The economic damage associated with default or near default would be severe and have serious consequences for the recovery of the United States and global economy." That, Mr. President, was amplified the last couple of days by Christine Lagarde, head of IMF, who says this is just awful for the world economy. The world economy affects us. We affect that. No country in the world affects the world economy more than we do. And we're going to affect it in a very negative fashion, which will have tremendously negative consequences for us. There are some Republicans in Congress who are threatening default, even being elated that we're going to have one, saying it doesn't really matter. Warren Buffett said using the threat of default to extract political payment, quote, ought to be banned as a weapon. It should be like nuclear bombs, basically too horrible to use. Warren Buffett said that. Now, by the way, Warren Buffett's dad was a Republican member of Congress. Business leaders are begging us to do the right thing and to do it now, quickly. In addition to America's reputation in the world, the bedrock of global economy is at stake, and I've already said that. Yesterday, a bill was introduced that would remove the specter of default and allow the United States to pay its bills with no preconditions or strings attached. Republican and Democrats may have our differences, but neither side should hold the full faith and credit of the United States hostage while we resolve them. Let's reopen the government. Speaker Boehner could end this government shutdown today, an hour from now, by letting the House, entire House, vote on the Senate's clean bill to reopen the government. When the Speaker is on national TV and other places saying, we don't have the votes, he will never know that because he won't let the measure come to the floor. Of course it has enough votes. Let's reopen the government. Let's pay our bills. There's no reason for Republicans to drag out this process and force the nation's economy ever closer to be an economically catastrophic default. And then let's negotiate. 200 days ago, to the day, Senate Democrats passed a budget led by Senator Murray that reflected our priorities. Since then, we've asked 20 times to negotiate a compromise between our budget and the one passed by Republicans in the House. We're not afraid to negotiate, but we need someone to negotiate with. We need, I guess, Madam President, a dancing partner. If Republicans end this irresponsible government as it appears now, and a government shutdown, remove the threat of a cataclysmic default and stop objecting to a budget conference, we can start negotiating now. Republicans already have been so harsh on their rhetoric, Madam President. Republicans have already done enough harm to our economy with their reckless shutdown designed to undermine the law of the land, Obamacare. But the consequences of first in history default on the debt would be far worse, even worse than the 2008 financial crisis from which we're still recovering. 2 years ago, the last time Republicans flirted with this terrible idea, America's credit rating was downgraded for the first time in the history of our great country. The stock market dropped 2,000 points. It's already dropped 7 or 8% over the last few weeks. Raising the debt limit doesn't cost taxpayers a single dime, and Republicans shouldn't claim it does, because it doesn't. That's certainly not what they claimed when George W. Bush raised the debt ceiling 7 times. Congress has raised the debt more than 90 times since it was created, the majority of times with Republican presidents. Ronald Reagan asked Congress to raise the debt 18 times, twice as many as any other president. And he, being the great orator he was, said that to do what is being done now, he used an example of why someone should never do that. He called it outrageous. Raising the debt ceiling simply allows payment of bills we've already incurred. Bills for wars, tax breaks, paid for with borrowed money. And basically, simple operations of our government. I heard one Republican senator today, I read about it in hearing, but he said, well, we have enough money coming in to pay the interest. Madam President, Social Security payments would not go forward. And that's only the beginning. To even consider defaulting on these obligations or to use the threat of default to extract concessions is terribly irresponsible and in negative fashion. It's irresponsible. That's the word that I should have chosen, Madam President. Republican Governor John Huntsman, who had been governor of Utah, this extremely liberal state, Utah, said this about the current Republican brinksmanship over the default, quote, "It's pretty sad, pretty pathetic for the greatest economy on earth to be experiencing this, Russian roulette with our economy." He went on to say, "We have to see it as an economic issue. If you think the government shutdown is a big deal, that's a hand grenade compared to a thermonuclear weapon that would be hitting the debt ceiling." Yesterday, the minority leader suggested that the only way to disarm this weapon is for me to engage in one-on-one talks with the Speaker of the House. I'm happy to talk to John Boehner anytime. We've talked. But it's obvious to me that no amount of talking will make the Speaker either willing or able to end the shutdown and prevent catastrophic default. In fact, as my friend, the senior senator from Arizona, said yesterday, it's time for the Senate to deal and to lead. And he's right. We have an issue coming before us momentarily, the debt ceiling. We have to be the Senate and lead and get that passed. Send it over to the House of Representatives. We've already passed a bill to reopen the government. We've already done that. But we're going to go a step further. Senate Democrats have introduced legislation to avert a default on this nation's obligations. So I say, Madam President, to my Republican colleagues in the Senate, the time for misleading rhetoric is through, and the time for responsible leadership is here. We're happy to work with our Republican colleagues, open the government, pay our bills, we'll negotiate anything they want to talk about.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for debate only until 2 p.m., and with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each. The Assistant Majority Leader.
Madam President, each morning the Senate opens with the customary prayer by our chaplain and the Pledge of Allegiance. This is an opportunity for members of the Senate to reflect on two important things. First, our mission on earth, not just as elected officials, but as human beings. And second, our devotion and loyalty to this great country. I've listened to most of the prayers that have been offered over the last 9 days of the government shutdown by Dr. Barry Black. He's a retired admiral from the United States Navy and came again before us this morning to offer a prayer. This prayer had a very important message to it. It was short and direct. He talked about this government shutdown. He reflected on the fact that we literally have families who in the last few days had that awful knock on the door where they were told that their son had died in service to this country in the United States military. 5 of them over the weekend, I understand 17 during the course of this government shutdown. And sadly, the support which we always give to these families is not there. It's not there. Customarily, within 24 to 36 hours, they are given a sum of money in advance on the benefits that that soldier earned so that they can take care of funeral expenses and the obvious needs of their family. We can't do that because the government is shut down. That awful knock on the door was not followed by the consolation of this government helping these families. And we offered to many of these families an opportunity to come and to be there to welcome at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware the return of their fallen hero. We can't offer them that benefit because the government is shut down. What Dr. Black said to all of us this morning, all of those who believe that a government shutdown is just another political gambit, what he said we should remember. And his words were direct and simple. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. It isn't just a matter of these families losing that loving son, that husband, that brother. It's a matter that our government, that asked them to risk their lives for this great nation, will not stand by them in this moment of grief. Oh, yesterday the junior senator from Texas came in and said, oh, I think we've already voted to take care of that. It's not true. What's happening now is the House of Representatives, which refuses to reopen the government, is now scurrying to pass a little bill to take care of these families. Let's get that bill in, they said. We don't want to face the embarrassment of another headline like this. That isn't enough, Madam President. It isn't nearly enough. Because the embarrassment of this government shutdown goes beyond this grievous situation with these bereaving families. It goes to so many different levels. Think about this for a moment. In the United States of America, when it comes to infant formula for babies, 60% of the infant formula is sold through one government program called WIC, Women's, Infants, and Children's Program. It's a program that brings in pregnant mothers and moms with new babies and does its level best to make sure those babies are healthy and off to a good start in life. In my state of Illinois, the largest county, Cook County, 50,000 mothers depend on WIC, the WIC program that provides the basics for healthy moms and healthy babies. The WIC program will run out of money this month. And when it does, the support for these families, for these moms, for these babies is in danger. Why are we doing this? Is this part of the Republican strategy? Sick babies, mothers unprepared to deliver? Is that part of their strategy? Is that their leverage for what they want to achieve? If it is, I have 3 words for them. Enough is enough. I just left my office and had a group of people from my state whom I have a special affection for. They're with what's known as the Primary Health Care Association. And I'll bet you have some in your state, North Dakota. These are folks that open the clinics in the neighborhoods and small towns so that people who aren't wealthy have access to a doctor and a nurse. I love them. I just love them to pieces because they put their whole lives invested in helping folks who are often ignored. They told me that despite the sadness they feel and even the anger over this government shutdown, there is a feeling of elation now that the insurance exchanges are open under the Affordable Care Act. People are coming in and saying, you won't believe it, but I qualify for health insurance for the first time in my life. These are their clients. These are the people that they help every day, and now these people will have the peace of mind of health insurance. Now that drives some on the other side crazy to think that Obamacare will go forward and provide this kind of help. In my state, over 250,000 people have already visited the websites. They're signing up now for health insurance, many of them for the first time. Ours isn't the most successful state. It appears per capita that the state of Kentucky is one of the most successful, some 10,000 people already signing up for health insurance that they otherwise can't afford or don't have. But this is part of the debate in Washington. The Republicans, many of them, are arguing, we've got to shut down the government, we've got to shut down Obamacare, we've got to stop these people from signing up for health insurance. It's not going to work. They cannot reverse history. This is a law that has been on the books almost 4 years, enacted by Congress, signed by the President, judged constitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court, a law we've had a referendum on in a presidential election when President Obama stood up and said, I'm going to fight for affordable health care and health care reform, and the Republican candidate said, I'll abolish it. President Obama won that re-election by 5 million votes. That's the verdict of history. That's the judgment of the American people. That is how we guide a democracy. There are some very wealthy, very extreme, who will never accept the results of an election. They think with enough money they can overcome the voice of democracy. They are wrong. And that's why what we're setting about here is to reopen this government, pay our debts, and then work out whatever remains in terms of issues. I ask my staff each morning, give me a list of what's happening because of this government shutdown. Madam President, I can't keep up with it. I mean, page after page, issue after issue. A major salmonella outbreak affecting hundreds of people in many states right now. U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food Safety and Inspection Service has announced estimated 278 people across 18 states, mostly in California, have been reported ill. They're working with the Center for Disease Control, along with state and local officials, to track that. That said, we've got to understand that with the government shutdown, these agencies are not fully staffed. Families and children across America are vulnerable because of this Republican shutdown strategy. For some, it will mean an illness they'll get over in a few days. For others, it could be more serious. The words of the chaplain ring in my ear. Enough is enough. We know as well that when it comes to this piecemeal approach, which we're hearing from the House of Representatives, where when they see these ghastly headlines of families, bereaving families who are denied basic benefits that we offer to the families of those who have fallen in service to America, when they face that embarrassment, they quickly manufacture a little spending bill to cover it, saying, oh, we'll take care of that one. Chuck E. Cheese calls it whack-a-mole, and that's what they're doing. Each time a story pops up, they try to knock it back down. Well, the Center for American Progress has done a review of the bills, the 14 bills that have been passed by the House. They fund approximately $83 billion in funding, just about $6 billion a bill. The total amount of non-defense funding in the original House-passed continuing resolution was $469 billion. Therefore, the House bills that already have passed or currently under consideration make up less than 18% of the total. So for all the efforts of the House of Representatives sending over these bills to react to embarrassments from their government shutdown, they can't keep up with it. The simple, honest answer is open the government. We have passed the bill and sent it to Speaker Boehner. He is living in political fear of calling that bill because he knows it will pass. The Democrats overwhelmingly will support it, and enough moderate Republicans will step up to reopen this government, and Speaker Boehner cannot accept that reality. He's afraid to call a vote. Well, how many more embarrassing moments will we have reporting on situations like these poor families who have given their all, who have lost their loved one, and now they're asked to suffer because of the Republican shutdown? It's got to come to an end. Yesterday on the floor, I appealed to moderate Republicans in the Senate to step up. Step up and join us. We're going to have a bill before us in a short time, I hope sooner rather than later, that's going to avoid a default on America's debt. If we default on October 17th, it'll be the first time in the history of the United States that that will occur. It will have a devastating impact on businesses, on jobs, and on the savings of Americans. If you have a savings account, if you have a retirement account, have you been watching it over the last several days? Have you seen what the Republican shutdown has done for your plans, for your future, and your family? This is unacceptable, and it will get dramatically worse unless we pass, in a bipartisan fashion, this extension of the debt limit for the United States of America. This will be a chance for moderate Republicans in the Senate to speak up and stand up. And before I close, I want to say a special word about my colleague, my Republican Senate colleague Mark Kirk, who announced this week that he would vote for a clean debt ceiling. I've said it back home and I'll say it here on the floor. It's the right thing to do for my colleague. It's the right thing to do for America. I want to express my appreciation for his leadership. I hope his example of stepping up and saying he's going to put the country first before his party is one that will be followed by other members on his side of the aisle. Madam President, I yield the floor.
President.
The senator from Wyoming.
Well, thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the comments of my colleague from Illinois, and I had heard him make reference to the insurance exchanges that opened last week, because it was 1 week ago that President Obama's health insurance exchanges opened. By all accounts, Madam President, it was a complete disaster. The administration had 3.5 years to prepare for the big launch. It spent months, spent millions of dollars advertising the start date, and yet on October 1st, the American people had their first chance to sign up, and the exchanges flopped. It was a complete fiasco. The administration tried to say that it was caught off guard. They said they were caught off guard by too many people going to the website on the first day. Madam President, even Saturday Night Live ridiculed the excuse. They said that's like 1-800-Flowers getting caught off guard on Valentine's Day. There were glitches the first day, but they lasted the whole week, the entire first week. Well, the question is, did the administration finally get its act together? Well, actually, no, it didn't. The past weekend, they had to pull down the website to try to fix some of the worst problems. USA Today, a newspaper whose editorials have actually in the past supported the health care law, they had to say yesterday, headline, health sites generate more error messages than coverage. That's the headline. The subheadline, exchange launch turns into inexcusable mess. Inexcusable mess. They go on, the administration managed to turn the experience for most of those visitors into a nightmare. They said that the websites crashed, refused to load, offered bizarre and incomprehensible choices. Even though the system was shut down for repairs over the weekend, they said Monday early reports continue to suggest an epic screw-up. Front page of the Wall Street Journal on Monday, software and design defects cripple health care website. Madam President, you don't take down the website for minor glitches. These are signs of major trouble. Some of us have been warning the administration has failed to prepare properly. We said that there would be security holes that would expose people to fraud and identity theft. Well, it turns out that the administration didn't even get to the point where the security flaws would actually matter early on because people couldn't even start entering their personal information. The exchanges were failing to launch. People got repeated error messages. They couldn't fill out forms or applications. They couldn't create an account to start looking at the most basic of information to even make comparisons. When they tried to telephone to get help, they found long wait times, and they got disconnected entirely. Even the administration's biggest cheerleaders admitted defeat. One reporter at MSNBC spent so much time trying to show viewers how to sign up for the exchange website online that she actually gave up. They were playing this on television. She finally threw in the towel saying, if I were signing up for myself, this is where my patience would be exhausted. The Wall Street Journal tried to find out what went wrong. It talked to computer experts, looked at who looked at the healthcare.gov website, and what the computer experts said is the site appeared to be built on a sloppy software foundation. According to those experts, such a hastily constructed website, now of course they had 3.5 years, such a hastily constructed website may not have been able to withstand the online demand last week. Even the far left wonk blog at the Washington Post couldn't believe how badly the administration had failed. One of its columnists wrote that, quote, the Obama administration did itself and the millions of people who wanted to explore signing up a terrible disservice by building a website that 4 days into launch is still unusable for most Americans. Wasn't supposed to happen this way. President Obama promised that using the exchanges, he said, would be like shopping on Amazon.com. Well, Amazon can handle 13 or 14 million transactions every day with no problem. There are over 5,000 websites generating more traffic than healthcare.gov. So how many people were able to successfully enroll in the healthcare exchanges on the first day? We have no idea. The administration doesn't want to talk about it. First, they said that we're thrilled that so many people were checking out the website. By Sunday, Treasury Secretary Jack Lew was on multiple television shows, refused to answer questions about how many people had enrolled, just repeating the White House talking points. He claimed that 4.7 million people had visited. Well, if they're willing to tell us how many people had visited the website, why won't they tell us how many people actually got coverage? The administration won't provide any data to back up its claims until, they say, at least November. Now, you got to remember, California claimed that 5 million people visited their website for its own state exchange on the first day. Later had to back up and say, nope, we're sorry, that wasn't true. It turns out that they had 645,000 visitors, less than a million, not the 5 million that they claimed. That's a state that spent $313 million on their site, and it couldn't handle even that many people because they had trouble. President Obama said he was going to have the most transparent administration in history. That's what he claimed. Well, the health care law is this administration's signature accomplishment. October 1st was the day that they had been working toward for more than 3 years. And now the President won't tell the American people, won't tell any of us how many people have even signed up for health insurance. Why not? What's the President trying to hide? CNN looked into the 24 states that set up their own insurance exchanges under the law. They found that as of last Friday, about 52,000 applications had been started. That's not how many people actually have completed their applications successfully. It's just they've started. It's not how many people have actually gotten insurance. That's just how many people get to the point of starting their application. So even if the Obama administration fixes the technical problems with its health insurance website, it will not have fixed the many problems with its health care law. The law will still not give people the lower cost, high quality care that they wanted, which was the reason we needed health care reform in the first place. But I think the American people will hold the President to his promises and hold the Washington Democrats that voted for this law to their promises. The President said just right before the exchanges opened that coverage in the exchanges should cost less than your cell phone bill. Less than your cell phone bill. He said you should be able to keep your doctor. And he said it would be as easy and secure as Amazon.com. So far, the President's health care law has failed on all of these. That was exactly what many of us warned would happen. It doesn't matter if the Obamacare exchange system failures happen because of heavy traffic or because of design flaws. The administration officials should be embarrassed, but they should not be surprised. Republicans warned that the exchanges were not ready for prime time, but the President and Democrats ignored calls for a delay. Why is the administration insisting now on fining people who don't have insurance, even though people can't even sign up on the website successfully? The President unilaterally gave big businesses a one-year delay in the employer mandate. Workers should get the same break that the bosses get. If bosses get a year break and a delay in the penalties, why shouldn't hardworking men and women all across the country get a delay of a year of the individual mandate? President Obama should have delayed the launch of his insurance exchange until it was ready. That would have been the fair thing to do. It is still the right thing to do. It is also the fair and right thing to do to give individual Americans the same delay of the mandate that the President has unilaterally, without the action of Congress, given to businesses all around this country. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander.
Senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask that the court...
Oh, without objection.
Thank you. Yesterday, Madam President, the Veterans Affairs Administration announced that it would furlough 7,000 Veterans Benefit Administration employees, and that as a result, activities and services in the following areas would be suspended: the Education Call Center, personal interviews and hearings at regional offices, education and vocational counseling, outreach programs, including at military facilities, the Vet Success Program on campus. But this announcement is only the beginning of the contraction in the services and activities of the VA. In fact, the VA also announced that at the end of the month it will run out of funding for compensation, pension, educational, and vocational rehabilitation and employment benefits. What does that mean to America? What are the consequences of the VA saying this shutdown means we are shutting our doors to processing and paying claims of men and women who have served this country, who have been disabled as a consequence of that service, who have earned educational benefits so that they can come back and continue to contribute to this country? What that means to America is that we are, in effect, defaulting and failing on a core obligation this country has to men and women who serve and sacrifice. America is failing to keep faith with its veterans. And America is failing on one of its most essential obligations. We ought to be ashamed and embarrassed that 7,000 men and women who want nothing more than to help their fellow veterans, in fact, half of those 7,000 men and women at the VA are themselves veterans, have been told, go home. And in fact, at the end of the month, the benefits and pensions and educational benefits that are received by veterans will have to be suspended because the VA is running out of money. Right now, it is, in effect, continuing on the leftover money that will last only through the end of this month. I spoke this morning to a veteran named Jordan Massa, a native of Bridgeport, who served for 6 years in the United States Army as an infantryman, including 2 tours in Iraq. Jordan Massa was injured in an IED explosion, a roadside bomb, that left him severely disabled with ear and back wounds as well as post-traumatic stress. And Jordan Massa waited for 2 years after he applied for the benefits that he needs and deserves. He waited for 2 years until October 1, just days ago, when he heard the good news that he would be receiving the disability benefits to which he is entitled. Not as an act of charity or beneficence. He is entitled to those disability benefits. And now, Jordan Massa is on the verge of being denied the benefits that he needs and deserves because of this shutdown. A Connecticut native awarded the Purple Heart, who has been a student at Tunxus and has sought to help other veterans as a counselor, giving back to this country even after his service in uniform. I spoke also to Aaron Jones, who works at the South Park Inn shelter, which serves homeless veterans in Hartford. That shelter is full. There are thousands of homeless veterans in Connecticut, millions across the country, who also are a mark of shame and embarrassment for this country. The greatest nation in the history of the world is failing to provide for men and women who have worn the uniform and now are homeless. And he is telling me that the government shutdown has created an additional obstacle to those veterans who want to leave that shelter to find permanent housing. Some are there for emergency, about 7. Some are there in transitional housing, about 10. And they want to resume productive and constructive lives. And this shutdown has created an additional obstacle to their doing so. In fact, for Aaron himself, who is a veteran and served in the National Guard, a tour in Bosnia, a tour in Iraq, this shutdown is a horrendous obstacle. At this moment, as I speak on the floor, there's a House hearing. The House Committee on Veterans Affairs has as its principal witness the head of the VA, General Shinseki, who has served this nation with distinction and dedication and has sought valiantly to reduce the backlog in disability claims and to provide benefits more efficiently and effectively to our veterans. Rather than using General Shinseki as a political punching bag, the House should simply have a vote. It ought to vote on a simple, straightforward, no strings attached funding resolution that will enable those 7,000 VA employees to come back to work and serve the people they love. It would provide for other essential services, whether at NIH, serving cancer victims, or the other agencies that work with the VA to help serve our veterans, like the Department of Labor and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The piecemeal approach that the House has taken, a cause du jour approach to governing, is simply inadequate and irresponsible. And the bill that they've sent to us, while it deals with the VA, would not provide for those other agencies that are essential to the VA's work, whether in training or housing or processing claims. This nation should be embarrassed and ashamed. This legislature ought to be embarrassed and ashamed that it is failing to keep faith with Jordan Massa, with the folks who live at the South Park Inn shelter, and countless other veterans in Connecticut and across this country who are entitled to benefits, pensions, and processing of their disability claims so that they can receive what they deserve and need. If the House votes, it will pass a simple, straightforward funding resolution. If the House is permitted to simply say yea or nay to that very straightforward, simple measure, this nation will keep faith with Jordan Massa, with Aaron Jones, and with the countless millions other veterans who, at the end of this month, will lose the benefits and pensions that they are entitled to receive as a result of their service and sacrifice to this nation. And so I ask the Speaker of the House to simply allow a vote. Let the House vote so that we can open government, pay our debts, and then reach a budget that is comprehensive and responsible and meets the needs of those veterans and many, many other Americans who are harmed and handicapped, enduring hardship as a result of the failure of that body, and it really is a small minority in one branch of the legislature, one branch of our United States government that is failing our nation. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. They gained is being lost day by day.
Well, I just want to thank you for your leadership under the department, and thank your employees for their good hard work. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. I'd like to remind my colleague that only the House has passed a bill that would allow for furloughed workers. The Senate continues to hold fast in not helping us resolve this particular situation. Dr. Benishek.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. I, like all my colleagues, would like to see this shutdown put behind us as soon as possible, and frankly wish that the appropriation process went on in regular order, that we would have passed the appropriate appropriations for all of the segments of our government. I'm happy that the House has passed military construction and VA bill in a bipartisan fashion, and hope that the Senate acts on that. And frankly, I think that the entire government should be funded in that usual fashion, that this policy of continuing resolution is just a bad policy. But nevertheless, you know, I understand that we're going to have to get something done. I had a couple of questions about the communication between the VA and the committee here. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that apparently the department issued a notice in late September that 95% of VA employees would be either fully funded or exempted from furloughs. You know, is that incorrect?
I would ask for the opportunity to go and retrieve whatever this announcement you're referring to. But I would say that if you look at VA as a whole, 90% of us are in VHA, and they are fully funded. And so as of 1 October...
Kansas.
Kansas.
I appreciate that, Madam President. I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
I understand we are in morning business. I would like to ask to speak for 15 minutes, which I think is reserved.
Without objection.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the government shutdown, what else. And it's my understanding that my colleagues across the aisle, I will not have the opportunity to speak to any one of them should they come down to the floor, but they are out on the Capitol steps, the Senate Capitol steps, exhorting the House to send something that they prefer, or to simply end the shutdown with a clean bill. I would have suggested they would go over to the House steps as a gesture of goodwill. I'm not sure any member of the House, I know when I was in the House, I'm not sure I would have appreciated either party getting on the Capitol steps and urging me to do something in the House. But let that as it be, perhaps it's a goodwill effort as opposed to further demands. I just want to make sure that everybody in Kansas, and I know I speak for everybody on our side, on the Republican side, did not want to shut down the government. As everybody knows, the current continuing resolution, and I am sorry that we have to go through continuing resolutions. That's where we bundle everything up on appropriation bills that have been, some of which have been worked through, and simply meld them together into a continuing resolutions. We don't do appropriation bills anymore. That's called regular order, and I really resent that, and I find that most unfortunate. So here we are, trying to consider how to fund the government. And many of us believe this funding measure should do everything possible to also control spending. Seems to be the real issue. Chief among these proposals would to be defund or at least delay the health care reform law. My colleagues and I have supported multiple measures to try to avoid a shutdown. In the past few weeks, while Republicans have offered no fewer than 3 solutions to avoid the government shutdown, I voted to keep the government open every single time. Most recently, the House is passing mini CRs to open the government piece by piece if we can't come to an agreement on a continuing resolution. Most people, if they pay attention to the media, know, or if the media even covers this, know what the House is trying to do. The first item of business would be to certainly fund the Veterans Administration. We've all seen about what is going on down at the World War II Memorial, unfortunately at the Marine Memorial as well, where we have yet to break the gate lines. Being the senior Marine in the Congress, I may lead a charge at the memorial sometime later this week. Haven't made up my mind yet. But at any rate, that's just not reasonable. And there's a lot of things going on, including death benefits for people who have paid the ultimate sacrifice here just recently in the current wars that are continuing going on. That's abhorrent. And why that decision was made by the Department of Defense, I really don't know. But at any rate, the House is trying to target these particular items, most of which have been mentioned by the President. So these CRs by the House have mirrored what the President says in regarding to the hurt that is being caused by the shutdown. So what the President says the House is trying to fix, send over to the Senate. It is very unclear as to whether the Majority Leader will even allow a vote in regards to these measures. I think Senator Cruz spoke to this in regards to Plan A when we were discussing this in the Republican conference. But at any rate, the Majority Leader has refused to consider a single one. So this debate isn't about shutting down the government. It's actually protecting, in part, to protect Kansas Americans from what I call a disastrous health care law that is damaging our economy, raising taxes and costing people their jobs. And it's about a president who is unwilling to lead, unwilling to even come to the table to negotiate. The president is now indicating he might want to negotiate on a short-term continuing resolution, but we don't have an agenda. We've had quite a few people offer up plans. The distinguished senator from Maine, Susan Collins, has a bill. It's a bipartisan bill. It calls for a short continuing resolution, a repeal of the medical device tax, and then fixing the sequester so that different agencies would have the authority to really pick and choose as to whether, how to meet the guidelines with regards to the Budget Control Act and the sequester. And then also oversight responsibility by the Appropriations Committee to take a look at what the various secretaries have done and make sure that that's all right. That would be Plan B. We got a Plan C by Paul Ryan that I just read about in the Wall Street Journal. So we're not lacking for plans. What we're lacking is a room. We don't have a room, we don't have a table, we don't have chairs, and we don't have anybody in the chairs. And by the way, I would just as soon not have another super committee that didn't turn out to be very super, selected by the leadership. We could have the Finance Committee, which has the jurisdiction, and the Ways and Means Committee in the House, which has the jurisdiction, and I'll bet you we could come up with something that would be reasonable. But at any rate, it's still about the Majority Leader insisting, no, he's not going to consider something like that unless, of course, the President would change his mind, and I hope he does. My colleagues across the aisle have refused to consider even the most moderate proposals, such as repealing the medical device tax as recommended by Senator Collins, and ensuring that members of Congress and their staff are treated the same as the average American in the Obamacare exchanges. Let me repeat that members of Congress and their staff are treated the same as average Americans in the Obamacare exchanges. When that came up in the Finance Committee, clear before Obamacare was passed, or for that matter, it went to the Finance Committee behind closed doors in the Majority Leader's office, where I think he was singing with Mr. Rich in terms of behind closed doors. but that's another story. At any rate, this was at that first time, and it was Senator Grassley who said, you know, I think it's only right that members of Congress and their staff live under the same rules. And he proposed that amendment. I voted for it then, and I will vote for it again if it ever comes up. Well, we did have it come up, and of course it was defeated by those across the aisle. So after failing to pass a budget last year and 3 years prior to that, or to pass a single funding measure this year, the federal government has been operating under a stopgap measure, as I mentioned before, called a continuing resolution. This is not what the people of Kansas expect from their government. Despite multiple disruptions and critical delays, the exchanges became active as of October 1, about a week ago. However, since then, we have heard feedback that the exchanges are off to a rocky start and are unusable, are totally disappointing, fraught with frequent error and messages from a failure of a major software component. That is also what people did not expect from any government program, and certainly not what has been sold as the President's signature domestic achievement. Unfortunately, this was not unexpected for those of us who have opposed the law since the beginning. And it really brings up an issue if you watch every major news media, and for that matter, the comedy shows that follow late in the evening. There's always somebody there trying to sign up with regards to a computer and following the instructions by the Department of Health and Human Services. First you get a smiling face, and then you get maybe 3 questions, one of which I was really interested in regards to what do you eat? What's your favorite food? What on earth does that have to do with signing up for Obamacare? Maybe they don't want somebody that they feel might be obese or something like that. Maybe that's the person who ought to be signing up. I don't know. But I know when I went through the first 16 pages, when I got them as a member of the Finance Committee on how you sign up, I got to page 3, and I wouldn't give any database. It is supposed to be a 6-mega database that we're using here. I just simply wouldn't give them that kind of information. I think part of the delay is probably hooked up on that, but you don't get even past stage 3. And then it says wait. I don't know how long we're going to wait. I know the President's called this glitches and bumps in the road. I think the front page of the Washington Post saying that many people had warned the administration this was not going to work is certainly pertinent with regards to this discussion. And I would offer up that there are system failures as opposed to bumps and glitches. I don't know when this is going to be worked out. And now, despite a government shutdown, again, my colleagues across the aisle will not consider solutions that acknowledge the widespread concerns expressed by the American people with Obamacare. Let me also point something else out. The nominee to be the new IRS director, the head of the IRS, I asked him first why on earth he would want to take on that job, and he said, well, I'm Mr. Fix-It, and that's what his resume says. And basically he came to my office. I asked him just a couple of questions, and I wished him well. And I said, how are you going to implement or enforce this fine that's going to be on everybody if they don't sign up? And then I understand from the administration that nobody has to put down their eligibility requirements with regards to income. So that's going to lead to fraud and abuse and scamming. Secondly, you can't sign up to begin with. And thirdly, how on earth is the IRS going to fine anybody when they do not have the implementation capability to do that? I asked the distinguished nominee who will come before the Finance Committee, and I'll ask him again, how are you going to do that? He said, I need 8,000 more people. I said, what do you think the chances of that happening are around here? And they'd have to be trained, right? Right. So they don't even have the people to enforce this if, in fact, they're going to enforce a fine. So why not just tell the American people, I'm sorry, but we're not ready to fine people. We're not ready to have people declare their eligibility with regards to income, and we're not ready to sign people up yet because of the glitches, bumps, or system failures in the system, and just delay it. Or maybe you could delay it, as has one prominent newscaster proposed, and just say, look, if you want it, sign up for it. If you don't have to. And you don't have to anyway because you're not going to get fined because the IRS has no ability to fine people. How are they going to do that? Cut back on your rebate check? Most of the people don't even get rebate checks. This is an idea that is just, falling apart. Now, I, for one, am going to do everything I can to not let this stalemate stand. I'm number 3 on the Finance Committee. I would encourage, basically, that we do meet and that we do have a continuing resolution that would extend this out and would allow us to try to work together for the systemic problems that face us with regards to the national debt. I would also say I want to work toward a solution, and I'm going to do everything in my power to bring my colleagues to the table. I think they want to come to the table. We have a lot of responsible people over there, good people over there who want it to this end just like this side does. But we race headlong into another debt ceiling debate with the President in the exact same position as he is on the shutdown, unwilling to lead, unwilling to even to come to the table, and we still have the majority leader saying no. And we have White House officials running to the media declaring we will default on our debt, the sky will fall, and that this will be the fault of Republicans. These claims of inevitable default are false, given the operation of the government and the cash flowing into the Treasury each month. So they are clearly posturing, in danger of posturing at that. No one wants a default. As well as a shotgun, nobody, or shut down by shotgun, nobody wants a default, least of all me. So it's the height of irresponsibility to make these claims, all while refusing to negotiate. What we are asking for and what we must do is very simple. Consider a debt limit extension and budget changes at the same time that answer our debt problem. And contrary to what Secretary Lew and other administration officials say, this is how these issues are handled. It's the regular order. The debt limit for at least the last 27 years for one small extension has been attached to larger spending cuts and budget reforms. This is not unprecedented. This is how we do business. This is the regular order. So the President's position is at odds with the stance taken by his predecessors of both parties, who saw the common sense of coupling deficit reduction with the extension of the debt limit. It's hard to figure the President's thinking on this. Maybe now that a huge portion of federal spending is on autopilot, he simply wants a blank check on how to fund it with automatic increases in the debt limit. Now, I want to mention something that bothers me. I'd like to go into negotiations, at least with certain things that are guaranteed, that have been guaranteed before. I'm talking about the Budget Control Act, and I'm talking about the so-called fiscal cliff. Fiscal cliff protected 99% of Americans from a tax increase and a state tax reform that really made sense and some real progress on capital gains. The Budget Control Act, as we all know, led to the sequester. Again, Senator Collins has a bill that would fix the sequester, giving people more flexibility to do it, but also oversight by the Appropriations Committee to make sure they do it right, or the Appropriation Committees, plural. But in meeting with the President, and he indicated in a press conference the other day maybe he could invite more people down to the White House. I really appreciate being invited down to the White House about 6 months ago. And the subject came to a grand bargain. And we were asking how this would work out. Madam President, I would ask for an additional 5 minutes, if I may have it.